And welcome to ABC News. I'm Ros Childs. Bill Shorten insists his party will deliver a better set of books than the coalition if it wins government on May the 18th. At the centre of his election hopes are sweeping changes to tax concessions, which Labor says are too generous and the coalition says are necessary to a strong economy. Political reporter Matthew Doran is travelling with the opposition leader.
Half a continent away from Canberra in tropical Cairns, Mr Shorten preempted his Treasury spokesman standing up to deliver detailed costings on Labor's policies more than a week out from polling day.
I don't mean to be, a bit of a history wonk here, but in 2010 the Liberals didn't reveal their costings to 2 days before the election. In 2013 they didn't reveal it till 3 days before the election. We're being upfront.
The opposition's proposed changes to tax concessions, curbing negative gearing, capital gains and franking credits will deliver an extra $154 billion to a Labor government's coffers, which he says he can spend on things like health and education.
And that means that we can do the trifecta of Australian politics. One, we can reverse the cuts to schools and hospitals, $7.2 million at Cairns Hospital, for example. Two, we can provide fair tax cuts for 10 million Australians, and in fact for the bottom 3.6 million earners it'll be better than what the government offers. And we can look after our pensioners who never get thought about in this government's agenda of fight for the wealthy. And three, we can provide better surpluses.
The man who would be Prime Minister says it's a matter of priorities, as is dealing with climate change. The coalition has repeatedly attacked Labor over the cost to the economy of its higher carbon emissions reduction target. But Mr Shorten is hoping his opponents get schooled on failure to act to protect the environment come May 18.
If they think they can get away with their scare campaign, they'll keep being the knuckle-dragging, climate change-denying, coal-wielding warriors that they are. The Liberal Party in Australia and the National Party in Australia need to lose an election to discover that climate change is real.
The Labor leader's campaign here in North Queensland is aimed at knocking off Liberal MP for Leichhardt, Warren Entsch. He holds this marginal electorate on a buffer of just under 4%, and it covers most of this sprawling state of Queensland. Mr Shorten is expected to fly home to his home state of Victoria this afternoon.
Matthew Doran there. Well, the Shadow Treasurer says Labor will generate $154 billion of savings by ending tax concessions while delivering bigger budget surpluses.
Because of our policies, Shorten Labor government will deliver a surplus next financial year, the same year as the government, bigger budget surpluses over the forward estimates, 40% larger than the government, a bigger budget surplus each and every year, next year and beyond, including all years over the forward estimates and over the medium term. We'd previously committed to bigger budget surpluses cumulatively. Today we're confirming bigger budget surpluses each and every year under a Shorten Labor government. We'll reach a surplus of 1% of GDP in 2022-23, 4 years earlier than the government is forecasting. That is $21.7 billion surplus in that year. These forecasts take into account all of Labor's policies, both spending and revenue, and also take into account an assumption that a Shorten Labor government will deliver further tax relief when the tax to GDP ratio hits 24.3%, the same rate as the Howard government. We can deliver these bigger budget surpluses and the bigger investments on health and education while also assuming tax relief going forward. Now, with that 24.3% assumption, Australia will of course remain a low taxing country in the lowest third of OECD countries when it comes to the tax to GDP ratio, as the next graph will indicate. Australia will remain a low taxing government under a Shorten Labor government. Now, as you know, we've adopted a proactive approach when it comes to policy of closing down and reforming tax loopholes and concessions which overwhelmingly benefit high wealth individuals. Australia has a two-class tax system. If you're of means, if your incomes come from a certain place, you've got good accounting advice, you get access to the first-class tax system. If you're a normal pay-as-you-go taxpayer, just the very basic deductions, it's economy class for you. We're reforming the tax system. These reforms raise $154 billion. Over 96% of Australians won't be impacted by the abolition of franking credit refunds. 95% of superannuants won't be affected by our changes to superannuation. 98% of taxpayers won't be affected by our family trust reforms. 99% of taxpayers won't be affected by our reforms to limit the tax deduction for managing your tax affairs. And 100% of people who currently negatively gear will be not impacted because of the grandfathering of our policy.